Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jacob YamatoCannon Mebdi, and I'm here to do a rundown of week number 5, day 4. We just had the first round of elimination matches in the BO3, and of course, it has a major effect on who is potentially qualifying to the World Championship. A lot of stakes on the line, but let's get down to business. Fnatic versus Mad Lions, in my prediction, I really didn't know what to predict. It was so hard to judge off of a week of very, very poorly played BO3s. Fnatic had a very, very bad meta read. Mad Lions had a very, very bad meta read, and it was very hard for me to predict this. At one point during my rundown, I did in fact flip a coin. I did address some of the changes Fnatic should be making and some of the changes that we should expect. I think a key point was just that Humanoid came in with a much better suited champion pool for what the meta is. I say champion pool, but we should take that with a grain of salt because Humanoid did in fact play two Jace games, and it's something that he has played in the past. Fnatic in the first game on blue side ban Ivan, Rakan, and Kaiser, and the follow up from Mad Lions is Tristana, LeBlanc, Poppy. The Kaiser ban might be strange for some to see that ban on blue side, but all things considered, I think that Kaiser, in terms of what she is as a champion, right, you need to be very, very good at creating circumstances where your melee support has enough impact around mid lane to convert that into bottom lane pressure. Kaiser is relatively weak in lane in a lot of matchups, especially when the enemy has counterpick support. So I understand that from Fnatic's point of view, stylistically, it makes less sense for them to actually play Kaiser. We'll have to see how that changes in case Fnatic plays on red side. Mad Lions ban Tristana, LeBlanc, and Poppy. Tristana is something that Humanoid spammed, and LeBlanc is something that he played, even though we haven't seen that prior from Fnatic just yet. I like the Jace first pick here because either you can create circumstances where Oscarini plays Rumble together with Jace, and you just pick whatever jungler is left, or you go for the route where you just get the Maokai. Another angle for Jace is to just go Sejuani, is something that a lot of people like to play. But nevertheless, the Jace lines up for the Maokai. Uh, Especially here when Tristana is out, picking Jace almost secures you Maokai 80% of the times. 20% cases is the case when the enemy mid laner plays Yasuo or Yon and is ready to play that, but that of course is very rare. Jace gets first picked, and Rumble Rel already highlighting Mad Lions. They're going for a full commit composition when the Rumble Rel. This is the combo that they lost against and downloaded from Excel, so they decided to look in themselves. Follow up is Maokai Zaya. Usually a very common misconception about poke compositions is that people think that you need to pick more poke champions. We see these compositions like Jace and Varus lose very, very hard because these type of champions, they do the same thing, which means that they lose against the same things. But Zaya is really, really good in poke positions because the enemy inherently needs to full commit and full engage on you, and Zaya is the meat grinder that Jace and Maoka are going to invite. So I really, really like the Zaya lock-in here, especially with the Kraken buffs that happened on 13-12, and additionally, the massive Navori changes. Zaya is one of the best AD carries on the patch. Mad Lions follow up with picking Ashe, which I think makes sense in the grand scheme of things here. I think you want to pick an AD carry that supports this idea that you have built up already with the Rumble and the Rel. Ashe arrows can support that. It's very important when you play Ashe that you create compositions that aren't, going to invite a lot of mercs and cleanse value because Ashe already forces that on her own. So it's very important to isolate that and create a draft that makes sense around that. Mad Lions follow up with banning some champions here that they know that Oscarini plays. Jax and K'Sante are strange bans to make because these are two champions that aren't that good into Rumble. Fnatic ban Vi and Sejuani, just junglers that Illuria plays, perfectly fine. They don't know exactly where Rel is going, and that's the power of the Rel flex. Here I was certain that Mad Lions, either they're going to lock in the Yone and play it that way, or they're going to go Ari and then just hard force the Rel into, of course, the support role. Very confusing here. Ornn is locked in, Braum is locked in because Fnatic is in the state of mind that the enemy is going to have to pick a melee support to complete the composition, and a range support would be very bad for them. Milio is very, very weak against poke, and Milio here, in my mind, doesn't provide anything. I was very surprised not to see, let's say, Wukong or Lee Sin just to pair together with the Arya. I don't see why you would pick Arya otherwise. You can even go so far to pick Viego to complete the composition, have Rel on support. Because either way, Braum is good into Rel, but the lane matchup is very irrelevant. Braum existing is going to hurt the Rel existence too. So it's not because you avoid the lane against Braum that Rel is going to be better. I don't think it makes any sense at all. Mad Lions just created now a circumstance where Jace gets turbo value out of his Mercury threads, and we really, really don't like that. That's why I think if you're playing this all-in commit composition, imagine you have Wukong here, your damage mix is much better, your all-in is also strong, and you can look to force kills to make Ahri reset, because that is fundamentally what your comp is designed to do. You want to find Rumble Rel engages together with your jungler, and you want to commit all the way. Milio provides absolutely nothing. Milio isn't strong enough with Ashe to find big lane advantages, and additionally, Milio has only synergy with Ashe. Even though I think Milio is still decent on the patch on 13-13, I think in cases where you're playing Milio Ashe only and Milio having no synergies otherwise is a very, very bad pick. If the enemy, let's say, Mad Lions picked Lucian on 4, similar to what G2 did, picking Lucian into Jace, and then they pick Milio on 5, I think then the composition looks a lot more cohesive. Milio has synergies and it makes a lot more sense. They could have also, let's say, in a case you play the Milio and you have the Tristana, I think that makes more sense. Here, I think the composition is already decided, and everything that you've picked so far commits to this one idea, and Milio is so counterintuitive. You're hoping that you're going to create enough of a lane advantage for this to be worth it, because Ashe won't carry this game. This is not a composition that is designed around the AD carry to succeed, so you boosting the Ashe is not going to matter. In this particular game, as you load into it, the key thing for Mad Lions and the advantage they have is that they should be stronger early. They should be stronger top. Rumble should be absolutely dominating the Ornn, and of course, Ashe and Milio should be dominating too. But in terms of how things played out, big shout out to Oscarinin, because he just won the lane. He won the lane. He controlled the wave. Mad Lions Chasey has been very underwhelming this summer. Very disappointing, especially after his spring split, where he did that monster run, where he was dominating all top laners. After the MSI and also the summer split, Chasey just has been a ghost in terms of what we expect from him. Chasey has been terrible. This particular game, he denied 1 minion XP from Ornn, and then he just has killed E, and Ornn, Oscarino just walked up and contested the wave and punished the fact that the Rumble wasn't hitting the wave. And then he got hit level 2 first, he got to crash a wave, he did some good trades, and then eventually the camera pans over and you can see that Oscarino is just completely winning the lane. Then on the bounce, Maokai contested the Raptors, Rumble was bouncing out, Rel was just based. Maokai came, killed Rumble, and they managed to push in all the way. Ornn could stick around because he had biscuits and potions, so he's very healthy, and he was bonking the turret with a level 6 to 5. As Rel, was pathing out on the map, Rumble couldn't even enter his turret, and straight up into a 2-0 scoreline, Oscarinin just solo kills Chasey. It started from level 1, and the level 1 bled into the fact that, of course, Rumble was very gankable in the spot that he got ganked in, which, all in all, completely sold the game. It was just a complete disaster. In this particular game, Mad Lions tried to find ganks around mid lane. They tried to camp Humanoid, which of course is a good strategy and is something that you need to do, but Jace has an easy time buying Mercs, already something that I mentioned. In this particular game, they kept trying to gank mid. There was a situation where, Ornn TP'd on mid and they overextended, and Fnatic was super far ahead due to their top side. There were cases where Fnatic overplayed their hand. I think the key thing about Fnatic is that today, this week, I think they had much better drafts. They showed this Jace hand and the Jace Maokai. We are wondering now for Fnatic in their future best of 3 how many layers of this onion exists. What is going to hide behind the Jace pocket? Is LB ready? Is Tristana ready? Are these things they are willing to play? This is very important to consider, especially when we look at the matchup against SK later. This game, a lot of back and forth. Fnatic, the majority of the time in a dominant position. I think that their composition was just much easier to play. Milio didn't really have a purpose. And then at some point, Ari, Rumble, Rel, they just didn't have enough juice to actually win out the fights. The Braum had too much value. The Ornn had too much value. And these champions just never ever died. And Jace and Xayah could do a lot of work on the back end because Mad Lion's composition is so AP heavy and it only plays one way. Already in this game, you could see signs of Hilly and also of Elioya having a very hard time, something that I highlighted needed to change in order for Mad Lions to actually succeed. Ari did her absolute best, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I think Mad Lions got outdrafted and they also outdrafted themselves as the game came to a close. Big highlight here, Oscarinin, the key things, if I summarize it in a very simple way, is just Oscarinin's management of top and punishing Jaycee made Rumble a redundant champion in the game. And then, of course, the massive draft gap that happened and Humanoid's ability to really, really make the presence of a Jace known. Because even though, a lot of resources are spent to make sure that Jace dies, I think a key thing here is that Humanoid finds the gold and he finds the value and plays team fights extraordinarily well. If I want to highlight Fnatic's strengths, coming into tomorrow, I think Fnatic, they are very good when they are on the same page. I think sometimes they have players that fundamentally think differently about things, and I think it's visible. I think in a lot of cases, there's I feel like Ivan is trying to squeeze opportunities because they're presented to him. And in isolation, I think that's something that is good if everyone's on the same page. While Humanoid wants to take the most safe approach where he, manages the waves and accrues advantages that are guaranteed, while Razork sees opportunities, and this is where you see mistakes happen from Fnatic's side. I think that finding a balance in between that is super, super important because Fnatic gave a lot of openings when it wasn't necessary for Mad Lions. I think it was very evident as well in the second game. If we look at the draft, Fnatic versus Mad Lions, Rakan, Ivan Kaiserban, and Mad Lions just run back the exact same thing. But the key difference here is that they banned Xayah on 3, setting them up to pick Vi. I think a big issue for them was, of course, the fact that they didn't have that AD jungle and an additional button from either the super role or the jungle role. So Jace is locked in, Rumble, Rel, and the adaptation here because Xayah's out, they just go for Maokai Ornn. Vi gets locked in on 3, and Mad Lions follow up with banning Braum and Alistar. I think Braum is a fine ban to do, I don't mind that at all. Alistar, maybe you should reconsider. Even though Trimby plays it, I think, sure, maybe in hindsight here, maybe the consideration is that you think that Alistar is going to be good into your Samira. Maybe the Samira is already pre-planned here, and it's something that they want to play together with the Rel, which is perfectly fine. Samira is already very good into what's showing Ornn, Maokai, and Jace. So maybe they just wanted to remove Alistar because of this reason. Maybe that was the case. But but then you can consider maybe even opening Braum because all in all, it's like Braum against Samira Rel. I don't think is necessarily good. I think that Samira W gets a lot of value there, and I think it's something that is worth to consider. But after losing game against Braum, Braum inherently with Emax and a fine lane phase is turbo broken. Here, I was saying, if you checked out my highlight, I thought Jinx, Thresh, Jinx, Janna is super good. Just find something that disengages, find something that helps you peel off the Rel and allows your composition to flourish in the context of just finding poke scenarios that work in your favor. Samira, as mentioned before, a lot of W value here. I don't mind the Samira at all. In this game, Mad Lions looked a lot better early. They had a lot more control over the game. They managed to create circumstances where they were ahead. They managed to find dives on mid. But everything quickly changed because the majority of time, which was so strange in my mind, is just that Elioya and also Hilly, they got caught so often in this game. I think the biggest deja vu that I have from this game is just Elioya running away from 5 Fnatic members because he is trying to gain information through River, and he's getting pushed out. I think that Fnatic did a very, very good job of opening through mid and then collapsing on side to find Griefers. And I think that Mad Lions, the only thing that really kept them in the game was Talia. And I think that Fnatic got a lot, very, very reckless in a lot of situations where they needed to just play on range. It's very important to be very disciplined when you play compositions like this, because it's very easy to fall into the trap where you want to go for the finish, meaning, you see that the situation is winning, and then you break formation in order to finish off fights. And what we saw in this game was kind of a Niski montage that kept them in the game. Talia was getting a lot of value because the fights were very losing for Mad Lions, and Fnatic decided to pursue, which gave space for many, many Niski montages that kept them in the game. Similarly, there were situations where Samira had her moments. There was a fast double kill around the river that occurred, and additionally, there was this fight around Nasher where Vi got caught, and Fnatic decided to, just push and pressure the Nash. Even in that spot, when the enemy is showing, I think it's more important to look for the turn, look for the EQs and poke, reset the Nash, keep it healthy, and let Maokai maybe tank it while you push her forward for the fight and the position. They needed to play with the information a lot better, because you could see a clear disagreement there in terms of pushing for the finish, being scared to get Rumble ulted, being scared, I think Rumble actually ulted on the Vi corpse before she died, being scared to be collapsed on in the pit, which makes sense against the enemy comp. I think that when the enemy pushed it too far, I think they should have also pushed it forward and looked to EQ with Jace and looked to poke, but instead they stayed in the pit, and unluckily Jinx actually got knocked up by Nash, which allowed Samira to use her passive. And then Samira tried to close the kill with a little collector dance, but she didn't get the kill on Jinx. All in all, a lot of these fights could have been so much more Fnatic favored, I think, if they just decided to play a lot slower. There was no rush at all, and when they rushed, they actually got punished. But in the end, this game became remarkably easy and unsatisfying as an ending, because a lot of the Nashers, a lot of the big swings of gold the Fnatic got came off the back of Vi and Rel just completely getting caught. I have to say, as we close off the chapter of Mad Lions here and reopen it coming into the regional finals, I think that Niski and Karzi were the most solid players of Mad Lions this entire split. I think that the other three really, really need to step up if Mad Lions want to take themselves to the World Championship. They need to win BO5s, and at the same time, I think that these players really want to represent Europe in a good way, but currently their form is the worst it's been all year long. They couldn't survive because this time around, Fnatic decided to actually hit the Nexus. They looked for an end, they found Rel, caught him again, and then just converted to an ending with, of course, Jinx. Looking at SK versus Fnatic, I think that Fnatic, I think they are individually better. I think that this is that type of game, this type of series that can play out in a very, very dirty way. I think the last time they faced off against each other, the key detail for me is just the fact that Fnatic had a very poor meta read, very, very poor meta read in terms of what to pick and what to play. I think that hurt them big time. I think SK had a beautiful Maokai Kaiser game, so I think this is something that they should look to deny. Maokai should be very, very contested. SK, I think it's very important for them to actually peel the layers of the Fnatic onion and really see what's under the Jace, see if they're willing to play the LeBlanc, see if they're willing to play the Tristana. And if the answer is right there for Fnatic and they can actually play these champs, this is where things get really interesting, because SK can also play the LB, they can also play the Trist, and I think these teams are going to be a little bit more on even footing when it comes to the meta this time around. I think SK in the series against XL, they threw and misread the progression of the series, which I see as a weakness. I think SK, the big shining star of the last series, I think was irrelevant. And the question now is, of course, can Oscarinin perform the same way he did today rather than in the series against SK? I do believe You know, thinking about how Mad Lions played today, I think that they did make it remarkably easy for Fnatic to look good and to win out the game. I think that same level of sloppiness is still there. I feel like Fnatic have disagreements sometimes about when they should squeeze and when they should push and when they should accept small victories. And I think this is where they look very incohesive. And I'm worried how does Fnatic look like when they don't have a composition that is very streamlined in terms of how it needs to play, and also if Fnatic don't manage to get leads. Because I think this is what they often rely on, actually getting leads in the early game. And I think that the key question for me when it comes to Fnatic converting games, can they do it consistently in less chaotic games? Because I think on many fronts, Mad Lions made it easier. SK lost against XL. I think the key thing for SK is that I feel like in games where something goes wrong, they struggle very hard to bounce back to the main and core idea of the game. I think there's been positions where they are super far ahead out of the early game because Markoon is a very, very busy jungler. You remember his Poppy game, you remember his Sejuani game, finds kills left and right, finds ways to snowball. And then how SK convert those positions, usually they overreach, overchase, and when one mistake happens, like dominoes, SK lose traction of the game. I think the DOS and Exakick has looked a lot better, and I think that this series will be competitive, and there's definitely a world where Fnatic loses. But I think that the individual prowess of Fnatic just make them a lot sharper in fights, and I think that's where everything will come down. I think Fnatic mechanically plays super, super well, and I think this is the main advantage that they have. I think the issue, though, is, and the concern for Fnatic is, how deep can they go in terms of draft and how will they maneuver around potential bans of what they showed today? And additionally, if they have a composition that is less streamlined in what it needs to do, can they trust Humanoid to manage the waves and the side waves really, really good? And can Fnatic act appropriately? Because sometimes I think that the spontaneity of their decision making puts them in worse positions to play out. While SK, as I mentioned, seems to be a team that tumbles down if a first mistake hits. But sometimes SK, all of their sequences land. We saw that first game of BO3s that SK played where they completely slam dunked with the Kaiser Maokai. This is the version of SK that is the most dangerous. But I think in terms of how many games we saw in that form from SK the entire year that have kept their lineup, I can count maybe 3, 4 of that level. If SK managed to play at that level, really converting their maximum ability, I think they could win against Fnatic. But I think that the mistakes will come from both sides, and I think Fnatic will find an edge in how the team fights should play out. And the main thing will be, support will be a lot more contested. I think Trimby had a massive advantage today by finding stronger and more useful support picks. And then additionally, Fnatic just mechanically super, super talented in team fights. But my gut feeling says Fnatic here. I think, it's going to be a close series either way. Team Heretics versus Koi. Why on earth did Koi go Quinn? Why do they go Quinn here? There was ever a time to pick Jax. I think this is the game. You have Sejuani locked in. Watching the previous series, Team Heretics versus BDS. I think something that they did so good, BDS, was a very appropriate analysis of, the champion pool of Evi. The answers that Evi had into Renekton were unsatisfactory, and I think that this is something that BDS will look to leverage again tomorrow. They will just slam Renekton and just chin check, of course, your boy Evi, and see what happens. I think a big change up for Team Heretics was Evi's performance. I think Mercer on the engage support, it reminded me of some vintage Mercer, how he connects with mid, connects with Viteo. and finds engages. I think this is something that Mercer did good in the Misfits run, and I think his real gameplay was good today. The big change up for Team Heretics today, I think that when they were on the mid wave, they did so with conviction. They had buttons to press. They actually engaged actively with Ornn ultimates and everything else to add. Flash of Renekton in this game, of course. Ari finding really, really clean engages. I think this was super, super good. The main concern here with Team Heretics was that, early game they fell super, super far behind and they were losing Drakes, and Koi could definitely bleed them out slowly. There was a point where Koi, with their composition, managed to find 2 core in Ezreal. Azzy was super, super strong. Quinn was super far ahead, naturally, because she's laning into Renekton. But Koi, with the Nashor that they pushed with, they got engaged TP'd on bottom side. And after that happened, it seemed like Koi kind of lost their mind, and Team Heretics actually figured out how they wanted to play the fights. They managed to find flanks with Renekton, which was super good from Evi, flanks from Ari as well, that was super, super good from, of course, Viteo, and then how Flacket just maneuvered himself around in the fight, dodging around abilities and still busting out big, big numbers. This was some of the best Team Heretics games that we saw all split long. I think Koi never really understood the role of what Sejuani needs to do in terms of marking the side lanes. I mean, the flanks, Rakan, the same thing. They didn't really create space for Ezreal and Azir to punish the people that walked forward. The engages were always very, very clean cut after that Nash on bottom side, where Renekton could just find flanks with the Flash W or an Everfrost from Ari, and then the castle that Koi needs to build was quickly collapsing. This castle had very, very little foundation, and Rakan, Quinn, and Sejuani didn't really understand the role that they needed to play in order to defend Ezreal and Azir, and Team Heretics delivered. This was a very good game from Evi. He managed to find a really nice base timer to deny a lot of the pressure from Quinn. There was no dive angles. Early game was super, super slow because, in all honesty, the only thing that can really happen is Ari and Viego, maybe pressure through mid. But a lot of these lanes are very, very stable, and Koi managed to find good lane leads. I think that's the only thing Koi really does well, is that through top and mid, they actually find lane leads, but then they struggle super hard to convert that in the mid game. And it seems like Koi is really, really lacking direction in terms of how they connect with jungle support. Jungle and support is such a non-factor for Koi in terms of how they impact the map as the later game proceeds. It seems like Malrang has his own idea and Advian has his own idea, and this is where Team Heretics really, really leverage their advantage. They're very good, better at analyzing the fights and how the flow of them should be, and a lot better to actually push hard when they actually had swing timers, when enemy players actually showed on waves. And this is what made Team Heretics much better on the day. Rel first pick, Azir Sejuani. I was surprised to see the LeBlanc here because I thought Team Heretics would go for the angle where they're looking to pick Kai'Sa over LeBlanc. Kai'Sa to play into LeBlanc if it gets picked, and then LeBlanc if Kai'Sa is out and Tristana is already out, so they set up LeBlanc for success. But instead, they set up this draft for Rel first pick. Koi decided to ban Kai'Sa. I think a part of Team Heretics here, I think they wanted to see if Koi actually wanted to play Kai'Sa. That's why they banned LB and just wanted to look for first pick Rel, which kind of makes sense because Koi had no Kai'Sa prior in the prior day. And when they played against G2, didn't pick Kai'Sa once. Even went so far to pick Sivir into Kalista, those madmen. But once again, I repeat, either you go Sejuani and Renekton together, so you have a combo and you deny it and you pressure Evi to be in a bad matchup, or you just pick Jax here because you have Sejuani showing already, because Quinn, it requires so much finesse to win games with Quinn, it is insanely difficult. And at some point, Shigenda was just running it down in the fights, trying to find assassinations on targets that really love it when you fly into them. So once again, Team Heretics, very good bounce back off of the TP on bot onto the Nash. But before that, of course, this game for the majority of us was kind of a struggle for Team Heretics. So it's important to highlight that Koi just struggled to convert a winning position. And usually when you have a winning position, you're the one holding the gun, and the amount of bullets you have is depending on how bad or good you scale, and additionally, how big your lead is. And Koi was holding on to one bullet. They fired it in their own foot, and then all of a sudden, Team Heretics picked up that gun and started smacking them with it. And that is the issue. But when you're holding the gun, how you aim is all in your hands, and Koi didn't aim true. In the second game, Team Heretics first pick Rel, and they check if the enemy is willing to pick Kaiser. Here the change-up is that Team Heretics ban Azir instead of Rumble, and Koi ban Rumble themselves. So here Team Heretics was looking for information. They found good information with the Rumble. And then LeBlanc as well, they were chin-checking the enemy. Are you going to pick Kaiser if we first pick Rel? This is the first Kaiser we saw from Koi, and they picked Sejuani too. This obsession with Sejuani is kind of strange, right? Because now when you pick Kaiser and you follow up with a Jace ban when the enemy banned Tristana, you're not going to find good pairings together with Kaiser. Kaiser's at her strongest when she can buy AP and she can scale in the game. But here, already looking in Kaiser Sejuani, I can't imagine a case where Larson is going to play like Yone. Maybe that could be an angle. You saw a lot of cream Yone today. Maybe like playing Yone isn't really real, you know? And the issue here is, you know that Koi is going to pick an AP mid laner. And then the follow-up is that, plain and simple, they're picking a mage mid, Rakan, Sejuani, Kaiser. They're already so damn AP heavy, and Kaiser is not going to have the same value as she has in other compositions. That's also important. Big discussion point has been, why are teams not playing these OP champs like Rumble or Jace Maokai or Kaiser or Tristana Rel? The most important thing is that you need to be able to find the strong pairings and be willing to play the pairings in other positions. Otherwise, you don't find the same value. And I think here for Koi, they don't want to play the AD mids. They don't want to play Jace themselves. And they pick Kaiser, and then their jungler picks Sejuani. This is something that Malang has been picking, for forever. He just picks Sejuani every game. Xayah gets locked in, good answer into Kaiser, and they have Rel engage, and then they pick Ahri. So already here, as you're dropping, you want to find an AD jungle that's going to be strong. Koi recognizes two, ban Vi and Viego, and then Gwen and Jace get banned to just set up for the blind pick Ornn. Not sure here why you want to blind pick Ornn. In some cases you can consider, of course, picking the Renekton. I was surprised to see the Ornn, especially after last weekend's performance, but I thought, Evie, he had some serviceable ults. At least he played like a very positive and good role for Team Heretics. And when that is true, Team Heretics does look like a team that has the potential to do more. I think that today in the game, I think that the games, Viteo definitely stepped up, Flacked stepped up. I feel like all of Team Heretics definitely played better than their counterparts. Sure, Shigenda got some lane leads on the Gnar and on the Quinn, but they were so meaningless in the grand scheme of things because the Ornn was there to use his ult and was around when necessary, and the Gnar and the Quinns didn't really progress the game. This particular game, Team Heretics managed to find a couple of kills for Xayah. Flacked got super far ahead. He even got a Penta denied from him. There was a time where Rakan tried to freeze bot and he got killed. And there was a time where he tried to cross through mid and Xayah got another kill. And then when that gold lead accrued for Team Heretics, they just showcased that they were much better at actually forcing on their timings and much better at actually, just managing side in a way that made them not bleed against the Gnar. Team Heretics won the game fair and square, and they were much better on the day than Koi. And Koi is out. Koi is out. If you're a Vitality fan, Team Heretics and Fnatic winning is bad results for you because this decreases the odds and chances of Vitality qualifying. Because if either Team Heretics or Fnatic make top 3, which seems likely now considering, BDS Team Heretics, I think that is a matchup that can definitely go multiple directions. SK vs Fnatic is also a series that can go multiple directions. Fnatic and Team Heretics ending up, in top 3 isn't too crazy to think about because now Fnatic or Team Heretics need to win one best of 3 and then one best of 5, and boom, they're in the top 3. Then, of course, in the case that Excel manage, to get top 2. They're already they're already top 3, right? Because they're playing the first best of 5, the winner bracket finals, and that will qualify them to the third place match if they lose, of course, or if they qualify to the finals. So Excel is also knocking on that door. The Vitality chances are looking slimmer and slimmer. BDS versus Team Heretics. I think the key thing, right? I think some that I mentioned already. BDS versus Team Heretics. I think the last time they faced off, right? I think BDS had a very good read on the bot lane meta. I think when Kaiser's out of the picture, Zaya and Varus are looking super, super strong, which I think is a positive. I didn't like the Vayne draft too much. Adam's awkwardness seems to be kind of an advantage into someone like Evie. I think that at the same time, Evie has been quite solid in lane, I think the key thing that BDS figured out is that they should just be slamming Renekton themselves. And I think when they slam Renekton themselves, the answers aren't that good. And I think Adam can then build an advantage and be super strong in the fights. I think that Renekton, generally speaking, is a very, very strong champion, and I think it's heavily underutilized here in Europe. But nevertheless, this is something that BDS recognized, just slam Renekton on cooldown. My main curiosity as well, Team Heretics, the last time they faced off, they kept playing this Tristana, and it's something that didn't work so well. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to actually play it this time around, because they have gotten better at actually managing sides. If Tristana doesn't get 10 CS per minute, this champion is completely useless, and it's very important to make your game plan around that. Team Heretics tried the Ivan too, and to be honest, even though I love Jankos, and I think he's one of the best junglers in Europe, he's the jungle GOAT and so forth, his Ivan was dog shit. His Ivan was atrocious. So that's something that Team Heretics definitely can take away from this series, right? How do they prepare for Renekton as a champion? And additionally, have they improved their Tristana, or will they drop it altogether? I think additionally, what you can think about is Team Heretics versus BDS. There was two compositions where they ran into Jace, and I think what was so crucial about this Jace is that in both cases, Maokai was out. And I think when Maokai was out, Team Heretics felt safe to play against Jace, but Shio actually has these AP pocket picks that he could play. He played the Gragas game, he played the Lilia game, and I think the key difference here for BDS and what makes BDS look like the team that they look like in spring is, of course, the fact that Shio is back at it again. Nuke has found comfort in Jace, and I think Team Heretics should definitely hit that. They should make sure that Nuke is off the Jace and force him to find different comfort champions in the current meta. Maybe make sure that you don't invite Cassiopeia angles, and then I think Veteo is a stronger player. I think Adam is the better player in the top lane matchup, even though I think Evie was a net positive today, which I think is a massive step up, and Evie deserves props for that. An additional layer of all of this is, Rel is going to be contested, and I think it will be interesting to see how Team Heretics' red side draft actually evolves. Another thing that Team Heretics showed today, right, is that the Zaya was crucial. Today, Flacket looked really, really good on the Zaya, and I think that if you peel that layer off, if Team Heretics, if BDS go into the draft, right, they make sure to target the Zaya in some shape or form, maybe with a ban, right, and additionally they contest the rel pick, and additionally they prioritize Renekton. I can see ways where they can find edges in draft. The main question will be, what will Nuke play when he can't play Jace and Cassio? I think his Syndra's not super interesting. Maybe we'll see Azir angles again, because this is something that Team Heretics adapted into banning. It could be something too. I'm curious if Adam is willing to play Rumble, but I think that he just wants to slam the Renekton whenever he can, whenever he's allowed to, and then pick champions against Renekton. But I think that's where it gets a little bit more dangerous, because I'm not a super big fan of the Darius, not a super big fan of Olaf currently on the meta, but this is something that BDS need to consider. In terms of converting later parts in the game, I think that BDS should be better there. I think Team Heretics have very good fight awareness, which I think is super, super good. I think that the role that the BDS players play in team fights sometimes, they look very incohesive. I think Team Heretics had very good spatial understanding and spatial awareness today. But I think that there's an added layer of looking really, really good against a team that does something so bad. And Koi definitely was the opposite of that. I have to lean towards BDS winning this one. I think Team Heretics, after what they showed today, I think that this series will be a lot more competitive than I anticipated. And I add the caveat that, my predictions were completely fucking off for this weekend. So I think more so than ever, I feel like the LEC, especially with the teams that are not facing G2 and the teams that are facing each other, I feel like it's really, really tough to predict because the games are rather messy and some mistakes cost you more than others. And that's where things are interesting, you know? I think if BDS were in the position that Koi was in today, when they had the Nash and so forth, I think that BDS would be capable of converting that into a victory. And that's where my main concern comes in. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the lack of gameplay footage. If you made it this far, bless you and bless your face. I'm quite tired. I had LPL playoffs this morning, and then I did analyst desk the whole day, and then I planned tomorrow's show, and I'm quite exhausted, but I just want to get some words in about the matchups and the games of today. If you made it this far, bless you and bless your face. I'll catch you guys on the flippity flop. Thank you.